Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is Friday, August the 2nd, 2024. It has been 3,839 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 163 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 160 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. You may find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and there are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only small changes from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, I don't mind. I won't even know. 1. We maintain that for the next 3 days, the risk of additional significant missile and drone attacks on Ukraine remains elevated. 2. Russian forces have breached Ukrainian defenses at Progress and will likely continue to advance west and southwest due to favorable terrain. Despite the breach, Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel are unsustainable. 3. Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but low troop morale, poor battlefield medicine, corruption and degraded logistics make it unlikely that Russian forces can achieve their 2024 operational goals. 4. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine remains unsuccessful in desovietizing its senior commanders and meeting its obligations to properly train all new troops, resulting in preventable battlefield errors. 5. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 6. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure. We assess that the risk of a serious international incident is increasing due to Moscow's belief that NATO is unlikely to respond. 7. We maintain that without a solution to restore air parity that slows the use of Russian glide bombs, Ukrainian troops will continue to be forced to withdraw, as Russia destroys every defensible position and location. 8. Russia will continue to commit increasingly worse violations of international humanitarian law until international watchdogs and Ukraine's allies take a unified and firm stance. 9. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 10. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 11. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia continues its attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Yesterday, at least 3 civilians were killed and 12 wounded. Over the last 24 hours, Russia only launched 1 Shahed-136 one-way drone and over a dozen reconnaissance UAVs. The Shahed and 7 recon UAVs were shot down. As noted earlier in the week, pauses in attacks and a sharp increase in intelligence, reconnaissance and surveillance activity indicate that a large-scale missile and drone attack is imminent. We assess that the probability of a significant missile and drone attack on civilians and civilian infrastructure within the next 48 hours is high. Now for today's action report summary. On Thursday, Russia carried out 127 assaults, and through August the 1st, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks dropped to 136. Russia carried out 955 discrete attacks over the last 7 days, a drop of 12% from the same period a month ago. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 63 airstrikes, dropping 61 bombs on civilian and military targets. Russian ground forces carried out over 4,800 fire missions with tubed and barrel artillery. Let's dive into what happened on the battlefield. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk and Hlyboke with no change in the situation. Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Tykhe, striking the village with Grad rockets. Near Kupiansk, Russian assaults carried out in the area of occupied Peshchane were repulsed. In the Svatovo AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian attempts to advance in the directions of Stelmachivka and Andreevka were unsuccessful. Ukrainian forces continued to carry out limited offensives west of Raigorodka and recaptured more defensive positions near Serhiivka. West of occupied Kremenna, fighting continued on the eastern edge of Makiyivka and east of Torske, with no change in the situation. In occupied Ploshchanka, an improvised Russian T-72 main battle tank with an RBU-6000 anti-submarine rocket launcher was destroyed by a drone. The RBU-6000 entered service with the Russian Navy in 1960 and can fire 12 213mm anti-submarine rockets. The rocket launcher first appeared on modified MTLB armored personnel carriers in 2023, and this is the first time the system has appeared on a tank chassis. The Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade targeted the Franken tank, initially believing it was a TOS-1 Sonsepek thermobaric rocket launcher. Last month, we reported that an analysis of Russia's Cold War reserves showed that the supply of MTLBs had been exhausted. It is unclear if the RBU-6000 was grafted to a T-72 due to the availability of Cold War-era 213mm ammunition or the shrinking number of replacement tank barrels available. Now, let's talk about the Donbas and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Ukrainian forces repulsed Russian assaults on Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, south of Ivanodarivka, in the area of Spirne, southeast of Vyimka, and south of Pereizne. In the Kostantinivka AO, reports from Russian sources that Ukrainian defenses were breached north of the canal district of Chasiv Yar were accurate, but left out critical details. The Russian advance was approximately 25 meters past the pipelines, where the canal runs underground, and a geolocated video showed the single BMD-4 light armored infantry fighting vehicle was destroyed by elements of the 225th Assault Battalion and the 23rd Motor Infantry Brigade. At least one Russian soldier was taken prisoner. Fighting continued west of Bogdanivka, on the western edges of the canal district, in the forested areas west of Ivanivske, in Klishchiivka, and near Andreevka. South of Kurdyumivka, drone operators with the 28th Separate Motor Infantry Brigade found a Russian Fab-250 bomb that had landed near Russian positions and failed to detonate. The drone operator flew the first-person view one-way UAV into the bomb, detonating it. It is unclear if ground troops asked for danger close air support or if the bomb fell off of a Russian plane. Heavy fighting continued in the Toretsk, New York AO, where Ukrainian forces made small but tactically significant gains. Fighting continued in or in the areas of Toretsk, Zalizne, Pivdenne, Panteleimonyevka, and New York. Ukrainian forces made a small advance in New York near the Kryvyi Torets River and captured Russian troops. Multiple geolocated videos confirmed the line of conflict from Druzhba to Zalizne. The head of the Donetsk City Military Administration, Vasyl Chinchik, said that reports of Russian troops entering the settlement were false. Quote, "Unfortunately, the enemy is also waging information wars, and I confirm that the city of Donetsk remains a free Ukrainian city that is simply suffering from devastating shelling from the aggressor. But the city is free, it is Ukrainian." Unquote. Chinchik added that 3,500 civilians remain in the city and the surrounding area, despite repeated requests to evacuate. In Southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out 53 assaults in the Pokrovskaya. Russian troops have been unable to advance in the direction of Malinivka due to the strong Ukrainian defense of Vozdvizhenka. Blocked at Novoalexandrivka, the intense frontal assault in the direction of Mirnograd and Pokrovsk continues. Russian forces likely occupied Timofeivka and made marginal gains in the direction of Sviridonivka, Lysychne and Ivanivka. A geolocated video confirmed that Russian forces are in the western part of Vesele, that's the one west of Progress, but have not consolidated their positions. In our assessment, Ukrainian forces are withdrawing from the village, with Russian forces pushing on the T511 highway in the direction of Grodivka. Heavy fighting continued east and northeast of Serhiivka and Zhalanne, with no new advances recorded. Further south, fighting in the area of Yasnobrodivka continued, and Russian forces remained stuck between Netailov and Karlivka. A French journalist asked the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, about the Russian advance and why Ukraine has been unable to stop it, with Zelensky responding, quote, "We were preparing 14 brigades. We wanted to equip them with weapons first of all. These brigades should be reserves so that we let the guys rest in rotation, and these brigades replace them. When we discussed and prepared the appropriate packages, this was for the staffing of these 14 brigades. In your opinion, if 3 brigades are equipped out of 14 brigades, can it be stopped?" The Secretary of Defense for the United States, Lloyd Austin, was also asked about the Russian advances at a press conference in the Philippines. Quote, "If you keep the big picture in mind, these are incremental gains. And what I see from the Ukrainians is an effort to continue to bolster their defenses. I think they've been pretty effective. We remain concerned about any advance on the part of Russia, but I applaud what the Ukrainians continue to do to make sure that they can hold their own." In the Vuhledaryo, the situation in Krasnohorivka was clarified. The Ukrainian 46th Air Mobile Brigade wrote that Russian forces, quote, "occupied the last major intersection in the northwest, connecting the central part of the city and the private sector. Urban development came under the control of the Russians, confirming our assessment of territorial control and where the line of conflict is located." Fighting was also reported in the area of Georgiivka, the northwestern edge of Paraskoviivka, near Kostantinivka, and in the direction of Vodyane. This is what we know about the situation on the Russian front. In the Krasnodar Krai, 2 Ukrainian drones struck the 500 kV electrical substation in Kubань electrical substation in Tikhoretsk. A fire was reported and circuit breakers were damaged. In Omsk, the Gazprom-Neft oil refinery, capable of processing 22 million metric tons of crude oil, had an industrial accident, setting one of the oil processing units on fire. Russian officials reported that 300 square meters of the plant was impacted. The refinery is over 3,000 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border, ruling out a drone strike. Here is my Theaterwide update. In July, Russian forces captured 177 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, mostly west of Avdiivka and east of Toretsk. It's the 9th month in a row of Russian territorial gains, ranging from 4 square kilometers in November 2023 to 201 in May 2024. During the previous months, the amount of territory captured by Russia was smaller than Caribou, Maine, the 150th largest city in the United States. In July, Russia launched 426 Shahed-136 and Gerberas one-way drones into Ukraine, reinforcing that annual production remains below 5,000. According to an analysis by the United States news agency Forbes, Ukraine launched 520 Beaver and other long-range one-way drones at Russia and Russia-occupied Ukraine. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly said they can significantly increase drone production, and funding is the only limitation. Ukrainian brigade commanders will now be able to draft men who have expressed interest in joining their military for specific openings within their units. The change will enable volunteers to choose vacant positions within military units, including non-combat rear echelon roles. The Ministry of Defense believes this change will simplify the recruiting process and increase interest in joining the military by eliminating the risk of being arbitrarily assigned to other military units. 26 prisoners, 8 from the West and 16 from Russia, including 2 children, were swapped after months of negotiations between Russia, Belarus, the United States, the United Kingdom, Slovenia, Germany, and Norway. Negotiations for the swap, the largest since the Cold War ended in 1989, had been ongoing for at least a year. From the West, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, dual Russian-US citizen editor for Radio Free Europe Alsu Kurmasheva, disgraced US Marine Paul Whelan, dual German-Russian citizen Kevin Lick, German Patrick Schäuble, dual German-Russian citizen German Moises, dual German-Russian citizen Demuri Voronin, and German citizen Rico Krieger were released. Russia also swapped political prisoners and activists Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin, Oleg Orlov, Alexandra Skachilenko, Andrei Pivovarov, Ksenia Fadeeva, Lilia Chanisheva, and Vadim Astanin. No Ukrainians, nor American Mark Fogel, who was convicted in June 2022 for drug trafficking after his August 2021 arrest, or US Army Staff Sergeant Gordon Black, who was convicted earlier this year for theft and making threats, were part of yesterday's exchange. Germany released Russian assassin Vadim Krasikov, who the Kremlin had disavowed since his 2019 arrest for the murder of a Chechen ex-field commander in Berlin. Krasikov is believed to have been involved in other assassinations and attacks, and was given a hero's welcome by autocrat Vladimir Putin. Russian spies Mikhail Mikushin, arrested in Norway in 2023, Anna Dultseva and Artyom Dultsev, arrested in Slovenia in 2022, Vadim Konoschenko, arrested in Estonia in 2022, Pavel Rubtsov, arrested in Poland in 2022, and 2 children of Dultseva, who were held in foster care in Slovenia, were returned to Russia as part of the exchange. The United States released Russian hackers Vladislav Klushin and Roman Seleznyev. Both were linked to the main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, but were not officially classified as spies. Some Russian state media channels expressed dissatisfaction with the lopsided exchange and lamented the release of traitors to the West. Lost in the headlines, it is estimated that over 30,000 Ukrainians, including 21,100 civilians, almost all children, are held in Russian prisons, work camps, pre-trial detention centers, and re-education camps under horrific conditions. Another 37,000 people are officially classified as missing. The International Committee of the Red Cross has been accused by multiple organizations and government officials of abdicating their responsibility to account for and protect the rights of prisoners and children held by Russia. And that's what we know. Join me on Monday, and we'll do it all over again. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.